welcome to the slow world, where the world quiets down and nature tells its story. Settle in and allow the weight of the day to drift away. There is nothing you need to remember. Simply listen as we follow a year in the life of a forest moss. Our story begins not with a cushion of green, but with something far smaller, almost invisible. A single moss spore, a microscopic speck of potential life, no larger than a grain of fine dust. It is a traveller, an ancient wanderer, born from the delicate, nodding capsule of a mature moss plant that grew, perhaps many seasons ago, on a shaded, damp rock far from here. Released on a breath of wind, a whisper in the vast forest, it drifted. It floated through the air, a tiny, weightless astronaut, carried on currents unseen, past towering trees that seemed like mountains from its perspective, over sun-dappled clearings that were like vast, bright oceans. It was one of millions, a silent, hopeful diaspora, each spore carrying the blueprint of an ancient lineage. A life form that has carpeted the earth since long before the first flowers bloomed. Its journey was one of chance, of surrender to the whims of the air. It had no power of its own, no way to steer its course. It simply was a particle of life adrift in the world. It passed through shafts of sunlight, glowing for a moment like a tiny, golden spark, then back into the cool, deep shade of the understory. It may have travelled for days or weeks, its fate uncertain. Many of its brethren would fall on dry leaves, or sun, baked stone, or the barren, sandy soil where life could not take hold. Their journey would end before it truly began. But this spore, our spore, was fortunate. The wind, which had carried it so far, began to lessen. The air grew still, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood. It began to descend, slowly, gently, spiraling down through the layers of the forest canopy, past the broad leaves of maple and oak, past the feathery fronds of fern. It landed, not with a crash, but with a settling so soft it was imperceptible. It came to rest on the rough, weathered bark of a fallen log, a great, ancient tree that had itself lived for centuries, and now, in its slow decay, was becoming a new world, a foundation for new life. The log lay in a cool, shaded hollow, a place where the sun rarely touched directly, where moisture lingered in the air, and the ground was always damp. The bark was fissured and textured, covered in tiny valleys and ridges, a perfect, microscopic landscape for a spore to find shelter. Here our spore rested, a tiny, dormant seed of green waiting for the right conditions, for the precise alignment of moisture, temperature, and gentle light. It held within its invisible form the patient, ancient wisdom of its kind. The journey was over. The waiting had begun. For days, perhaps weeks, the spore lay hidden in a tiny crevice of the decaying bark. The world around it was immense. Ants, like giant, armoured beasts, marched past on their mysterious errands. A beetle, its shell a shining, iridescent jewel, explored the rugged terrain of the log. Raindrops, when they fell, were like miniature oceans, briefly flooding its world before soaking into the wood or evaporating back into the air. The spore was patient. It was a single cell, a condensed promise. It felt the subtle shifts in temperature, the changing humidity of the air, the muted light that filtered through the canopy. Then, one cool, misty morning, after a long, gentle rain had soaked the forest floor, the conditions were perfect. A deep, resonant signal, older than thought, older than words, passed through the spore. It was time. Deep within its tiny, protective wall, life stirred. The spore began to swell, absorbing the precious moisture from its surroundings. Its single cell divided. Then divided again. A slow, miraculous unfolding was beginning. A tiny thread, like filament, paler than the palest green, emerged from the spore case. This was the protonema, the first, tentative reach of the moss into the world. It was not yet a true moss plant, but a precursor, a delicate network of branching green threads, so fine they were almost invisible to the naked eye. This filament, guided by an ancient intelligence, began to explore its new home. It crept across the surface of the bark, seeking moisture, seeking a secure hold. It was fragile, vulnerable, but possessed of an incredible, quiet tenacity. It anchored itself in the tiny irregularities of the wood, its almost invisible rhizoids, not true roots, but hair-like structures, finding purchase. They did not draw nutrients from the log in the way a tree's roots draw from the soil. Moss is more self-sufficient than that. The rhizoids were for stability, for holding on. The moss would draw its sustenance from the air, from the rain, from the dust that settled upon it. The protonema spread slowly, a delicate, emerald lace unfurling across the dark bark. It was a living tapestry, each thread a part of a larger, growing whole. It photosynthesized, drawing energy from the faint, filtered light, turning sunlight, water, and air into life. Then, from this spreading, thread-like network, new structures began to form. Tiny buds, microscopic green nubs, appeared along the filaments. Each bud held the potential to become a true moss plant. One bud, then another, began to differentiate, to grow upward. Tiny, leafy shoots emerged, each one a miniature marvel of design. The leaves were not like the leaves of a great tree, complex and veined. They were simple, often only a single cell thick, designed to absorb water and light directly across their entire surface. The first true moss plant, no taller than the thickness of a fingernail, stood upon the log. It was a tiny, perfect spear of green. The long journey from spore to plant was complete. A new life had taken hold, a small, quiet victory in the vast, ancient forest. The single, tiny moss shoot was not alone for long. From the same network of protonema, other buds unfurled, other leafy stems reached for the filtered light. They grew close together, their small forms supporting one another. Slowly, painstakingly, over weeks, then months, the individual plants merged into a collective. A colony began to form. It spread outward from that first successful landing site, a slowly expanding circle of green on the dark, decaying canvas of the fallen log. This was not a conquest, not a rapid takeover. It was a gentle, patient occupation, a quiet claiming of space. The moss grew in layers, new shoots rising above the old, creating a dense, soft, and intricate structure. To the human eye, it became a cushion, a patch of deep, rich emerald green velvet, cool and soft to the touch. But to the tiny creatures of the forest floor, it was a world. A miniature forest within the larger forest. Its densely packed stems and leaves created a unique microclimate. Within the moss cushion, the air was more humid, the temperature more stable than in the exposed world just inches away. It became a refuge, a haven. Tiny, almost invisible insects, like springtails and mites, found shelter and sustenance within its labyrinthine depths. They moved through the tiny spaces between the leaves and stems, their world a complex, three-dimensional maze of green, a tardigrade, a microscopic, water bear, one of the most resilient creatures on Earth, might navigate the film of water clinging to a single moss leaf, an ocean to its tiny senses. A small, brightly coloured spider, no larger than a dewdrop, might spin its intricate, almost invisible web between two moss shoots, a silken trap for even smaller prey. A tiny snail, its shell a perfect, translucent spiral, might graze slowly across the surface of the moss, leaving a glistening trail of slime, a temporary silver river in the green landscape. The moss itself was not just a passive backdrop. It was a living, breathing entity. Each tiny leaf, only a single cell thick, was a marvel of natural engineering. It had no cuticle, no waxy protective layer, like the leaves of larger plants. This meant it could absorb water and nutrients directly from the air, from the rain, from the dew that settled upon it. But it also meant it was vulnerable to drying out. The moss colony lived in a constant, delicate balance with moisture. When water was abundant, after a rain or on a misty morning, the moss would be plump, its leaves turgid and vibrant, its colour a deep, rich, almost luminous green. Each leaf would hold a tiny, glistening film of water, the entire colony sparkling as if adorned with countless tiny jewels. But when the air grew dry, when the sun, for a brief period, managed to penetrate the canopy and touch the log directly, the moss would respond. It did not wilt in the way a flower might. It simply, patiently let go of its water. The leaves would curl inward, the stems would shrink slightly. The vibrant green would fade to a duller, more olive hue. The moss would enter a state of dormancy, a kind of suspended animation, waiting with an ancient, unshakable patience for the return of moisture. It could survive like this for long periods, a testament to its incredible resilience. The colony was not uniform. It was a landscape of subtle variations. In the deeper crevices of the bark, where moisture lingered longest, the moss might be taller, more lush. On the more exposed ridges, it might be shorter, more compact. Different species of moss might even grow side by side, their textures and shades of green creating a subtle, beautiful mosaic. It was a slow world, the world of the moss. Its growth was measured in millimeters per year. Its life unfolded at a pace almost imperceptible to the larger, faster creatures that moved through the forest around it. but it was a world of profound beauty, of intricate detail, and of quiet, persistent life. A velvet green kingdom, thriving on a fallen log, in the heart of the ancient woods. Water was the lifeblood of the moss, its constant companion, its most essential need. The moss colony's entire existence was a dance with moisture, a cycle of absorption and release, of plump vibrancy and patient dormancy. When the rain came to the forest, it was an event of profound significance for the moss. The first drops would land on the canopy far above, a soft, rustling sound that would slowly grow in intensity. Then the water would begin to drip, to trickle, to cascade, down through the layers of leaves, gathering an earthy scent as it fell. For the moss, each falling raindrop was not a small thing, but a significant arrival. A single drop, landing on the dry, curled leaves of the dormant moss, would be instantly, greedily absorbed. The cells, parched and waiting, would plump up, the leaves unfurling, the colour reviving from dull olive to vibrant emerald almost before the human eye could register the change. As more rain fell, the entire moss cushion would transform. It would become a saturated sponge, heavy with water, glistening in the dim forest light. The tiny spaces between the stems and leaves would fill with moisture, creating a temporary, miniature wetland. For the microscopic creatures that lived within the moss, this was a time of abundance, a flood that renewed their world. The moss had no roots to draw water from the log. It drank with its entire body. Every leaf, every stem, was a surface for absorption. It held the water within its structure, a living reservoir, releasing it slowly back into the atmosphere through evaporation, or letting it drip down to the decaying wood beneath, contributing to the log's slow return to the earth. After the rain, on cool, still mornings, another form of water would embrace the moss dew. As the temperature dropped overnight, moisture in the air would condense on every surface in the forest. The moss, with its intricate, feathery texture, was a perfect surface for dew formation. Each tiny leaf tip would be adorned with a perfect spherical droplet, a tiny lens reflecting the first, pale light of dawn. The entire colony would sparkle, as if dusted with diamonds. This dew provided a vital source of moisture, sustaining the moss through dry periods between rains. Even fog, the silent, white breath of the forest, was a gift to the moss. When the fog rolled in, blanketing the woods in a cool, damp embrace, the moss would absorb the moisture directly from the air. Its leaves would unfurl, its cells would rehydrate, even without a single drop of rain falling. The moss colony was a master of water management. Its densely packed structure helped to trap and hold moisture, creating a humid microclimate that benefited not only itself, but also the myriad of tiny organisms that called it home. It acted like a miniature sponge on the forest floor, absorbing excess water during heavy rains and releasing it slowly during dry spells, helping to regulate the moisture levels in its immediate environment. This intimate relationship with water defined the moss's life, its appearance, its very existence. It was a creature born of dampness, thriving in the wet embrace of the forest, a testament to the life, giving power of water in its many gentle forms. When the water was present, the moss was a vibrant jewel of green. When the water retreated, the moss waited, patient and resilient, knowing that the water would, inevitably, return. The life of the moss colony unfolded through the slow, grand cycle of the changing seasons. Each season brought its own challenges, its own subtle beauty, its own unique rhythm to the forest floor. Spring arrived with a rush of new life. The harshness of winter receded. The days grew longer, the sunlight filtering through the still, bare branches of the deciduous trees was warmer, more direct. The forest floor, released from the grip of frost or snow, became soft and damp. This was a time of awakening for the moss. Fed by melting snow and frequent spring rains, the colony would be at its most vibrant, its green afresh, almost luminous hue. This was also the season of reproduction for many mosses. Tiny, delicate stalks, called sporophytes, might rise from the green cushion of leafy gametophytes. At the tip of each stalk, a small capsule would form, containing the next generation of spores. These capsules, often a contrasting brown or red, would stand like tiny, intricate lanterns above the green moss, waiting for the perfect dry, breezy day to release their precious cargo to the wind to begin the cycle anew. Summer brought a different kindica of challenge. The canopy of the great trees above would be fully leafed out, creating a deep, green shade. This shade was a blessing for the moss, protecting it from the direct, scorching heat of the summer sun. But summer could also bring long, dry spells. The frequent spring rains might give way to weeks without significant moisture. During these times, the moss would enter its state of dormancy. It would appear dry, perhaps a little shrunken, its vibrant green fading to a more muted olive tone. It was not dead, but waiting, conserving its resources. Its life processes slowed to a bare minimum. It was a master of endurance, able to survive conditions that would kill more delicate plants. Then, a summer thunderstorm would arrive, the air thick with the smell of ozone and wet earth. The rain would drum on the leaves above, then cascade down to the forest floor. And the moss, as if by magic, would revive within minutes, its colour restored, its leaves plump and glistening once more. Autumn painted the forest in a breathtaking palette of red, orange, and gold. The leaves of the great trees, their work for the year done, would begin to fall. They would drift down, spiralling through the air, blanketing the forest floor in a thick, rustling carpet. For the moss colony on the fallen log, this was a time of partial burial. The fallen leaves would cover it, insulating it from the cooling air, but also blocking some of the already fading light. The moss, however, was adapted to this. It could survive even under a layer of leaves, drawing moisture from their slow decay. The autumn also brought cool, misty mornings, heavy dews that would soak the moss, keeping it vibrant even as the days grew shorter. Winter arrived with a deep, profound stillness. In colder climes, A blanket of snow might cover the forest floor, encasing the moss in a world of white silence. The snow was not an enemy, but a protector. It insulated the moss from the harshest freezing temperatures and from the drying winter winds. Beneath the snow, the moss would remain dormant, but alive. Its life processes slowed almost to a halt. It was a deep, patient sleep, awaiting for the return of warmth and light. Even if ice formed, the moss had an incredible ability to survive freezing. Its cells contained natural antifreezes, and its structure could withstand the expansion of ice crystals. It was a creature perfectly attuned to its environment, able to endure the extremes of every season. Through sun and shade, through rain and drought, through warmth and frost, the moss colony persisted. Its life was a slow, steady rhythm, a quiet testament to the power of adaptation and the enduring beauty of simple, patient existence. The moss colony, nestled on its decaying log, was more than just a collection of tiny plants. It was a living embodiment of ancient wisdom, a teacher of the slow life. Its existence was a quiet rebellion against the rush and urgency of the larger world around it. It had no need for speed. Its growth was measured in imperceptible increments. It spread across the log, a process of centuries, not seasons. It did not compete aggressively for resources. It simply took what was offered: the filtered light, the falling rain, the dust from the air, and transformed it into green life. It was a pioneer, one of the first life forms to colonize bare rock or fallen wood. Its presence helped to create soil, its decaying older layers, adding organic matter to the substrate, paving the way for other, larger plants to take root. It was a humble foundation builder, a silent, patient servant of the forest ecosystem. The moss held memories, not in a conscious way, but in its very structure, in the layers of its growth. It held the memory of countless rainfalls, of winters past, of the changing light of innumerable days. It had been there when the great log it lived on was still a standing tree. It might have begun its life as a tiny patch on a living branch, only to find itself on the forest floor, when the old tree finally fell, a witness to that slow, momentous event. It offered a place of stillness in a world of constant motion. To pause and truly look at the moss was to enter a different timescale, a different way of perceiving. It invited contemplation. Its intricate, fractal patterns, its subtle variations in colour and texture, were a universe in miniature. A world where the smallest details held a profound beauty. The moss taught the lesson of resilience. It could dry out completely, appear lifeless, and then, with the return of water, spring back to vibrant life. It bent with the wind, yielded to the weight of snow, and endured the heat of summer, always returning, always persisting. It was a symbol of quiet strength, of the power of gentle endurance. It asked for nothing, yet gave so much. It provided shelter for tiny creatures. It helped to create soil. It held moisture, regulating the microclimate around it. It carpeted the forest floor with a soft, green beauty, a living embroidery on the earth. Its life was a slow, Deep breath, a meditation in green. It was a connection to something ancient, something fundamental. The quiet, patient, enduring life force of the planet itself, expressed in its simplest, most humble, and perhaps most beautiful form. The moss colony, a tiny, velvet world, held the wisdom of the ages, whispering its slow green secrets to anyone who would take the time to stop and truly see and listen. The campfire crackles softly, a sound as old as the forest. The moss rests, as it always has, a small, green heart, beating slowly, patiently in the deep, quiet woods. Thank you for wandering with us in the slow world. May your rest be as calm as the ancient forest floor, and may sleep find you gently